When it comes to film director and screenwriter Christopher Nolan, several things are a matter of consensus. Among these, that he is one of the most critically acclaimed and financially successful filmmakers working today, and also that he is among the most ambitious. The visceral power of Nolan's large scale epics is matched only by their philosophical complexities. Here, however, we encounter another consensus regarding Christopher Nolan, namely, that his films are of a politically conservative nature. It is this consensus that I wish to challenge today. Please note, my claim is not that Christopher Nolan himself is a leftist. Nolan says that his films are not intended to be political, and though we may take him at his word regarding his intentions, all art is political or carries political connotations, regardless of whether the artist intends or is even aware of those connotations. In all likelihood, Nolan is a liberal, and though liberals and leftists may ally with one another at times, they differ on key issues, especially issues relating to capitalism. Let us consider this point of distinction. Leftism is opposed to social hierarchy, and capitalism is a form of social hierarchy. Therefore, leftists are opposed to capitalism. In opposing capitalism, leftists oppose the free market as well as private property. Please note, leftists distinguish between personal and private property, the latter of which is, like the free market, a feature of capitalism. The ideology of leftism is, in a capitalist society such as ours, revolutionary. Liberalism, as an ideology, may seek to regulate and temper capitalism's most egregious aspects. But liberalism, from its very beginnings in the Enlightenment, has not ultimately been an enemy of capitalism, but rather an ally. Liberalism favors personal and private property, as well as the free market. This puts liberalism and leftism at odds. With that being said, what are Christopher Nolan's films politically? Are they liberal? Are they leftist? Are they some variation of conservative? Are Nolan's films, as many commentators have asserted, neoconservative? Imperialist? Or perhaps even fascist? I will attempt to demonstrate that his films are neither fascist, nor imperialist, nor neoconservative, nor conservative of any sort, nor even liberal. I will attempt to show that whether or not Nolan intended it or is even aware of it, the logic of his films is leftist and revolutionary. Nolan's films evoke hopes and aspirations of liberalism, the hope that perhaps a better world might be achieved, a more equitable world based upon the leadership of individuals. However, his films indicate he is profoundly aware this ultimately can only stall the collapse of the current political system, that the current system is collapsing and collapsing quickly. His protagonists often struggle just to enact some sort of damage control. In the end, the only solution that his films offer is a sort of revolution, that which Thomas Kuhn called a paradigm shift. Let us define our terms. A paradigm, as defined by Thomas Kuhn, is a taken for granted, holistic picture of how things function within a system. Within a paradigm is everything that the people who dwell in that paradigm consider possible or even imaginable, hence why it is sometimes called a field of intelligibility. For an example, I will offer an anecdote. In November of 2016, I was in therapy, and I told my therapist that I was concerned that Donald Trump could win the 2016 presidential election. Of course, this went against all political wisdom. It was a matter of consensus that Trump would not win, that he had no chance. And this view was held by my therapist. Her attitude was not just that Trump's victory was impossible. It was rather that it was unthinkable to her. That the very idea of a Trump presidency would somehow violate her reality. Indeed, not just her reality, but the reality in which so many of us live, a reality of consensus. That politics is supposed to function in a certain way, and that certain things lie outside the Overton window. Of course, this is not how the election turned out. Of course, my therapist was mistaken. The unthinkable became thinkable because it happened. This is what is called a paradigm shift. When an old worldview collapses, often violently, because new occurrences, new things happen that cause the old worldview to become utterly untenable. Kuhn pointed to the Copernican revolution as an example of this. The move from the geocentric to the heliocentric, a change in our entire understanding of the universe. We are now in the middle of another paradigm shift. Neoliberalism is collapsing. The old paradigm, what was called capitalist realism by Mark Fisher, is becoming increasingly unviable. The very world seems to be collapsing. Unthinkable things happen. Climate change encroaches upon our door. This is reality run amok, reality losing its grip on us. And it is in this realm that Nolan creates his films. Epics in which a collapsing world threatens to break the characters, not just physically, but intellectually. Their very certainty, their very grasp over the world is becoming a matter of uncertainty. In his earlier films, the characters would struggle to escape their own psychological traps. Lenny in Memento is caught in a trap wherein he cannot escape the lies he has told himself. Detective Dormer in Insomnia is trapped under the all-seeing gaze of a never-setting sun. His guilt always in sight. He is quite literally unable to escape time, caught in a purgatory, if you will. Nolan's films all are said to deal with time. This, too, is a matter of consensus. Yes, there is non-linear storytelling, but it is just as important to note Nolan's films begin with the characters defeated. They begin in a loop. In the early stages of his career, this loop is found at an individual level. The tormented psyches of anti-heroes, trapped in their own guilt, trapped in their own grief, looking for a way out, looking for a way home. This can be found in Nolan's films up to Inception, where a character is quite literally trying to escape a maze in order to find his way back to reality. The maze being one he himself has constructed. A maze he cannot even think about escaping, because that maze is his paradigm. It is his world. To escape is simply unthinkable. These are protagonists. This does not mean they are heroes. Make no mistake, they are anti-heroes. Characters who may incidentally do some good, but like so many hard-boiled detectives in film noir, heroism seems impossible, unthinkable. Capitalist realism reigns supreme. And in capitalist realism, there's no room for community, no room for heroism. Only an apocalypse that comes sooner or later when the world has outlived its usefulness. Nolan famously has a penchant for an aesthetic of cinematic realism. He avoids green screens and CGI whenever possible. In a behind-the-scenes featurette for Tenet, Nolan explains he is after textures. These real-world textures are the textures of urban destruction, textures of collapse. He captures, almost fetishistically, the grit of an explosion, the shattering of glass, the clattering of concrete, and buildings being destroyed, not from without, but from within, as if their very foundations have become incendiary. His drab, muted color palettes complement this atmosphere of decay. To date, Tenet is perhaps the most interesting example of his obsession with textures. The very premise of the film is concerned with entropy, a pervasive momentum tending toward disorder and disintegration. The inversion of entropy compounds this chaos, to the point that it feels as if the very laws of physics were ripping themselves apart. This occurs not just at the physical level, but at the political level too. A code phrase the characters often exchange. We live in a twilight world, and there are no friends at dusk. And the reason for this devastation is made all too clear. The greed of the 1%, selfishly depleting the planet's resources, boasting that they have sold their futures, money for time, and the resulting ecological devastation puts us in a war with our own future. It is one of cinema's most poignant reflections on climate change. The film wrestles with the fear that it is already too late. Even before guns go off, we see smoke wafting out of bullet holes, and before an explosion takes place, we see the dust cloud. We see the devastation to come, the detritus of a coming war. The pervasive pessimism in Nolan's films rules out the sustainability of the current neoliberal paradigm. What is the answer then? A fascistic preoccupation with heroism, as so many commentators claim? Surely heroic individuals may play a part in stalling collapse, and this explains Nolan's preoccupation with time, simply trying to keep time from slipping away, lest the world slip with it. But hidden in Nolan's films, there is a better solution, which we find not in his protagonists, but in the supporting characters. As film scholar Todd McGowan has observed, Christopher Nolan's films notoriously obscure their ethical center. One of the primary ways that they mislead spectators is by presenting a hero in whom the spectator can invest, only to reveal that the film's ethical center lies elsewhere, that the investment has been misplaced. This center is usually not the focus of the filmic narrative, nor the ostensible hero. Most often, the ethical center appears as an alternative to the ostensible hero and his mode of existence. The figures of this example extend from Leonard Shelby's wife in Memento, to the Joker in The Dark Knight, to Mal in Inception. Let us return to The Dark Knight, the very film that radicalized me into leftism. How could the Joker, a terrorist, constitute the ethical center of this film? McGowan writes, "It is the Joker, not Batman, who gives the most eloquent account of the ethical position that they occupy together. He sets himself up against the consequentialist and utilitarian ethic that rules Gotham, and he tries to analyze this ethic in order to understand what motivates it. As the Joker sees it, despite their apparent differences, all of the different groups in Gotham indulge in an ethics of what he calls scheming. That is to say, they act not on the basis of the rightness or wrongness of the act itself, but in order to achieve some ultimate object." This monologue is often misunderstood and unfairly derided. The Joker clearly plans throughout the film, so this seems like a bald-faced lie. However, what he says makes sense, I think, if by plan we understand a schema for running a society. Whether that schema is run by organized crime families, the police, billionaires, or elected officials is irrelevant. The very structure of the schema for a society, insofar as it is a society like ours, will be unfair and cruel, valuing the lives of those at the top, devaluing the lives of those at the bottom. This is why the Joker is an anarchist, because even his vision of anarchy, a Hobbesian war of all against all, to which I and other anarchists are opposed, that vision is, as he puts it, fair. It is a level playing field. He believes that a society like ours, hierarchical, unfair, selective in whose lives matter and whose do not, is a society not worth keeping. And indeed, he predicts society won't keep much longer, and he seeks to accelerate its collapse. Like other accelerationists, he uses the unjust logic of capitalist society against itself. He forces people to choose between their lives and others, a dilemma that parodies their struggle for resources under capitalism's artificial scarcity. So well does the Joker understand the hierarchies and systems he despises, that every move the so-called heroes make to stop him backfires. It looks hopeless. Not only will the system collapse, but it will collapse in the worst of ways. People will turn on each other. They'll throw each other under the bus. They'll eat each other. And then, just once, the Joker is stopped. Stopped in a way he did not intend. He is stopped not by the police, not by the decree of elected leaders, not by liberal reforms or right-wing vigilantes. What stops him is precisely the unthinkable, something that breaks from the paradigm of capitalist realism. The people decide they will not throw each other under the bus. They know they will be killed if they do not sacrifice each other. They know it is in their best interest to destroy each other. But they do not do this. Like the Joker, they have suspended their calculations, their ethos of utilitarianism and consequentialism. But unlike the Joker, they choose community, not chaos. They decide they're done playing his game, the game of capitalist realism. This is the revolution that Christopher Nolan's films offer us. This is the paradigm shift. The collapse of our paradigm is inevitable. What may be our deliverance, our miracle, is the unwillingness to segregate between those worthy of life and those unworthy, to instead affirm a solidarity such as Nolan saw in the story of the Dunkirk evacuation. It is an unwillingness to sacrifice others, to throw them under the bus, to abandon them if there is still any possibility of saving them. This togetherness, this community, is the answer. It is the boat we must take to break out of our loops, to break out of this doomed paradigm, out of capitalist realism. This unthinkable solidarity, this is the revolution.